Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to the latest edition of the First Thursday Club from RSK Biosensors. First off, happy World Wetlands Day, everyone. Who knew? Very appropriate for what we're going to be talking about today. My name's John Davis. I'm a director at RSK Biosensors and also at RSK Wilding, which is why I'm particularly interested in the subject matter today, because the work that we do for Biodiversity Net Gain is pretty much a nature-based solution focused on reversing biodiversity loss. But you will find out today about all sorts of other nature-based solutions from our speakers. Before I get onto them, though, I will quickly move through the housekeeping. If you could move on the slide, thank you very much. Right, all of you are muted for the whole webinar, I'm afraid. However, that's not to silence you completely. Feel free to ask questions by going into the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you type questions in there, I will be going through those through the talk. And then we'll get on to a Q&A session in about half an hour, and I'll be going through some of those. If we have too many to get through in the quarter of an hour we have, then the panelists are very happy to answer those questions by email afterwards. Finally, there will be an email asking for feedback in about an hour's time after the call. If you could give feedback, that would be great. Perhaps come up with ideas for topics that we can cover in future editions of the First Thursday Club. Okay, so on to this month's talk. If you go on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Kat and Tony. Kat Evans is Associate Director for BD and for ADAS Natural Solutions. She also has a background in biodiversity conservation and has brought these two things together into creating a team that delivers nature-based solutions as part of RSK Habitat Management and ADAS. And then Tony comes from more of an engineering background and from the water industry. He's Chief Operating Officer for Solutions by Nature, which is a joint venture between another two RSK companies, Binny's and Salix. And we have also on the call later a cast of thousands for our panel for the Q&A. So Boyd, David, Russell and Wayne will join us at the end for the questions to answer the difficult questions, because Kat and Tony have said they don't want to, which is fair enough. Okay, so without further ado, if I can ask you both to pop your cameras off, I will do the same, and I'll hand over to you, Kat.
Thank you, John. So why do we need nature-based solutions? We're all aware of the various negative impacts that we've had on our planet, whether due to climate change, pollution, development, or habitat loss, which has resulted in disasters like droughts and flooding, along with threats to our health and economic well-being, food and water security, and also biodiversity, and the list goes on. This has been recognised by various organisations, and policies have been created to address this, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Net Zero by 2050, the UK 25-year Environment Plan, which also looks at nutrient neutrality, the Associated Environment Act with Biodiversity Net Gain, and with Brexit, the phasing out of the basic payment scheme and development of future farming funding schemes and the environment land management schemes. Consequently, many government departments and agencies, businesses, landowners and land managers are looking to address these issues. So why now? So in addition to Biodiversity Net Gain being mandated as part of granting planning permission from this November, which thankfully will place more focus on biodiversity, and the increasing pressures of nutrient neutrality, which is impacting greater areas, there are also more grants available. The Nature for Climate Fund, which focuses on woodland creation and peatland restoration, and the Big Nature Impact Fund, which links through to natural capital, that's the monetization of nature's benefits such as carbon storage, and other mechanisms like blended finance. Many companies now need to show their own commitment to the United Nations SDGs with their own environmental, social and governance non-financial reporting. And this is also translating into procurement. as clients expect their supply chain to help deliver these ESG targets, whether for carbon or biodiversity, and by leaving a legacy that also involves more positive stakeholder engagement. But there's also been a shift. I don't know about you, but I've noticed more people are talking about wanting to do something meaningful rather than just tick boxing or at worst, greenwashing. So what are nature-based solutions? Nature-based solutions is an umbrella term for working with nature and natural processes to adapt to key challenges like climate change, whilst enabling local benefits for people and wildlife. The most referenced definition is by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which describes nature-based solutions as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems which address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, while simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. A simpler description by Natural England for green infrastructure, and I think this can be applied to all nature-based solutions, is nature doing its job. The societal challenges identified here in the icons are climate change, mitigation and adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and economic and social development, human health, food and water security, and finally, environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. So I've included some photos here of some of the work that we've done around woodland and wetland creation, grassland and peatland restoration and management practices with regenerative agriculture. And these were primarily to address the challenges of climate change, disaster risk reduction, food and water security, and biodiversity loss. Now, these are all land-based, but they could include marine and coastal projects like mangrove or seagrass meadow restoration.
Thanks, Kat. While nature-based solutions are considered soft engineering, they can also be used to solve some very complex technical engineering problems. By restoring rivers to their natural processes, we can help mitigate issues of over-abstraction and low flow. Integrated constructed wetlands are a series of shallow surface flow wetland cells that use dense native vegetation to treat wastewater by natural physical, biological and chemical processes. They can also increase biodiversity and sequester carbon. Finally, we might have all heard of green infrastructure solutions such as green roofs, green walls and rain gardens. However, what you may not realise is that we can actually use these natural materials to create highly engineered large retaining structures as well.
So as you can see here, nature-based solutions provide multiple benefits. Well-designed nature-based solutions can address the primary driver and then lead to greater multiple co-benefits than, say, traditional hard engineered solutions. For example, developing green infrastructure in cities, like green walls or roofs or rain gardens, can help with climate adaptation, but also reduce stormwater runoff, water pollution, improve air quality, the quality of life of residents, and can be good for business. They can also be more cost effective. Many interventions like natural flood management can be small but highly effective. And cost-benefit analyses often demonstrate that they are more cost-effective than traditional solutions. So, for example, flood risk reduction with river restoration or improving water quality with peatland restoration. They can also complement grey infrastructure and technology. It's not an either-or situation. Nature-based solutions, such as green infrastructure or regenerative agriculture, can easily be integrated alongside more traditional solutions, materials and construction methods. And it's also highly adaptive. It can be reviewed and changed easily, or even removed if necessary.
I think we're all probably aware that certain materials and methods used in traditional approaches to engineering and construction produce a lot of CO2 emissions. However, I wonder if we're aware quite how much this might be. Whilst various figures are available on this, it would appear that the built environment contributes around 39% of all global CO2 emissions, with 11% of that coming from materials and construction. Moreover, looking at the most common materials involved, we see that the CO2 emissions equate to 72 kilos per tonne of concrete produced, around 600 kilos per tonne of cement produced, and a whopping 1.8 tonnes per tonne of steel produced. Let's think about that last figure for a moment. For every tonne of steel we produce in the world, we create more than that in CO2 released into our atmosphere. By using softer engineering methods and natural materials, we have a massive opportunity to reduce this impact. And in fact, many of these alternative solutions actually then further mitigate this by sequestering and storing carbon from the air. So what might these opportunities be to employ nature-based solutions as alternatives to hard or grey engineering approaches and reduce those CO2 emissions? Bioswales are shallow, slope-sided vegetated channels with filtration media and an underdrain. They collect, store and convey surface water runoff using bioretention to remove contaminants and sedimentation. They can be particularly effective when installed by large roads, preventing hydrocarbons from vehicle exhausts from entering the drainage network and replacing traditional concrete channels. Spillways enable controlled release from water-retaining structures during or following high rainfall and flood events, and are traditionally constructed from concrete with steel reinforcement due to the forces involved and erosion potential of the water. However, these can be built from a combination of recycled product and natural materials, including mulch, biochar, which is a nutrient-rich fertilizer produced from pyrolysis of biomass, and blankets of coir or coconut fiber. These spillways can withstand high velocity flows and have been shown to suffer no erosion or damage from a 1 in 30-year flood event. Sustainable drainage systems, or SUDs, are a series of features such as swales, detention ponds and retention basins to holistically manage storm and surface water flows, constructed with natural materials and sustainable processes. By attenuating and retaining water, these can reduce flood risk and provide an element of filtration to mitigate the cumulative effect of diffuse pollution throughout the catchment. Additionally, they are considerably more aesthetically pleasing than grey alternatives and can deliver the typical benefits associated with nature-based solutions, including creation of habitat, thus increasing biodiversity. SUDs have been mandatory in Wales for all new developments of more than one dwelling or 100 metres squared construction area since 2019. And DEFRA announced only recently in January of this year that SUDs will become mandatory for new developments in England by 2024. I mentioned previously that we can use natural materials to create retaining structures. Typical masonry retaining walls can be supplanted by vegetated retaining walls, consisting of bags of sand and compost in interlocking configurations. This allows rapid installation at site and results in 1/3 the overall cost of typical concrete masonry block walls. Hydroseeding, which is a spray of slurry of seed and mulch, then enables the seeds to germinate quicker, hence achieving the green wall finish faster. So if these nature-based solutions are so great and deliver multiple co-benefits, then why aren't we implementing these everywhere all of the time? Well, the reality is, like with any new approach to anything, there are potential challenges that we need to overcome. Whilst the environmental and water sectors we work in may be at the forefront of promoting and delivering these solutions, this is an emerging science and market. We find there is still a general lack of awareness to the types of solutions, or at least a misunderstanding of the risks versus the benefits. Therefore, risk-averse industries and cultures may be quick to revert to traditional, known approaches. Education is key to unlocking this, hence the importance of webinars like this one. There are a multitude of different potential solutions out there, so it can be difficult to understand where to start, both in terms of solution type and literally where in a catchment will deliver the most benefit. Largely, nature-based solutions are not off the shelf. They can be highly bespoke, landscape fit, where designs and costs vary considerably from site to site based on a large number of variables. Application of natural capital accounting can help identify where the best opportunities might be by assessing the performance benefits against required drivers along with their economic value. This can unlock potential additional funding streams such as grants to support the investment case. As an emerging science, the volume of evidence and data available for the technical performance of nature-based solutions is still relatively low, especially in the UK where compared with other parts of the world. By their very nature, these are open, dynamic systems impacted by several factors outside the influence of designers and operators. Coupled with tight regulatory consents, this increases potential nervousness in adopting and investing in these solutions. Generating more data through further trials and demonstration sites will increase confidence in performance certainty. Additionally, negotiations with regulatory bodies may be required to provide time for solutions to bed in and dispensation for variations in performance. Nature-based solutions can be characterized by a long payback period in that the performance and economic value of the benefits delivered by the solutions are realized over a long time. Additionally, successful performance of the solution is often measured over years as opposed to weeks and months, further exacerbating the issue. This reinforces the need for methods such as natural capital accounting to properly assess this when looking at solution feasibility. The land required for a nature-based solution can be significant, leading to negotiation for acquisition with landowners who can be reluctant to sell for various reasons. However, there are leasing model options available, such as those used for solar farms, which then provide the landowner with a sustained revenue stream without needing to relinquish ownership. Selection of land type is also extremely important. For instance, with carbon storage or flood control solutions like woodland creation, it's important that we don't only focus on a singular driver and ensure that low quality agricultural land is selected so as not to impact food production and end up resulting in a greater carbon footprint. And finally, landowners are waiting on greater clarity around both the legislation and potential incentives with respect to their own carbon commitments. Until this occurs, many may be hesitant to commit their land for other purposes when they might need to create nature-based solutions to address their own net zero challenges.
Thank you, Tony. So now we're going to look at some case studies from ADAS Natural Solutions and then Solutions by Nature, two of RSK's nature-based solutions offers that reflect the specialisms of their own experts. Before I go into these, I'll quickly introduce ADAS Natural Solutions, which brings together two RSK sister companies, ADAS and RSK Habitat Management. And as ADAS Natural Solutions, they can help at any or every stage of the journey, providing a robust approach to design and managing the project underpinned by scientific and environmental expertise and practical experience. ADAS scientists, policy and environmental advisors have been carrying out research, advising governments and landowners, and predicting outcomes for land management and more sustainable agriculture for the last 75 years. And their rural experts can secure land or advise on funding. Whilst RSK Habitat Management have decades of practical experience of creating, restoring and managing various habitats such as wetlands and peatlands to woodlands. And they're both underpinned by science and technology, whether mapping or modelling, labs or specialist plant, and supported by the RSK group for any local or niche expertise or just capacity. And current projects include landowner liaison to deliver wider environmental targets and greater biodiversity net gain for Severn Trent Water on land nearby a new sewer pipeline, enabling landowners to suggest solutions that work better for them and nature. So this woodland creation scheme at Broughton Hall in Yorkshire is being led by our woodland creation lead, Wayne Scurrer, independently. The aims for this scheme are to capture 30,000 tonnes of CO2 to help meet the net zero emissions for 2050 target and to slow the flow and reduce flood risk to Leeds. Working in partnership with the Environment Agency and the White Rose Forest, 180 hectares of new woodland was created on marginal sheep-grazed land. And it was the largest tree planting scheme in England in 2021 and the first phase of a 1 million tree planting scheme. Our expert oversaw the woodland plan, permits and environmental assessments, sourced climate and flood management grants. He also procured and supervised planting of 240,000 trees and is overseeing the maintenance and monitoring. This year, he'll supervise the planting of a further 45 hectares of structurally diverse woodland pasture and seeding of wildflowers. And this woodland creation scheme is part of a larger network nature recovery programme which includes other interventions such as natural regeneration and wetland creation. Monitoring is a key part of measuring the success of the scheme, and the Environment Agency are monitoring the runoff and have already recorded a significant change, possibly because of 240,000 tree pits acting as mini ponds. And our expert is monitoring the successful establishment of the trees, which is around about 90%. And then baselines for carbon and biodiversity have been carried out. Initial monitoring has shown a significant uptake in abundance of moths and voles, and now bird of prey surveys are being planned. This is probably more due to the longer tussocky grass rather than the trees themselves. Co-benefits identified but still being measured include more habitat for biodiversity and nature, sustainable UK grown timber from the thinnings, recreation and increased access to nature for people, increased employment, and a boost to local economies as part of a green recovery. So now we'll look at a peatland restoration case study. The National Peatland Action Programme, managed by Natural Resources Wales, leads in the restoration of damaged peatland to address the nature and climate emergencies. Restored rewetted peatland contributes to ecosystem resilience and a range of nature-based solutions, including biodiversity conservation and enhancement, carbon storage and capture, curbing greenhouse gas emissions, water flow containment, and wildfire suppression. At Carnfleer, the aim was to restore the natural hydrological conditions to reinstate blanket bog functionality and reverse the processes of erosion and re-establish peat forming conditions. Our team, led by Boyd Henderson, carried out contour bunding, peat dam construction, gully blocking, and hag reprofiling. Key challenges included remote working, difficult access, deep peat areas so that bogging machines was a constant risk, as well as weather with snow and windblown trees posing a risk of becoming stranded on site. This means experienced staff are essential, ones who know how to work in those conditions and understand the best way to restore the particular site, as each one is very different. And the use of the right equipment, and these range from low-tech timber bog mats to an excavator with 1 meter tracks and in-cab technology, and that's to prevent damage to the delicate bog surface and reduce risk of sinking into the bog. And the in-cab technology includes GPS for tracking where the work's done, cameras and telematics for monitoring fuel use and performance. And the work was completed last year, and there are already immediate signs that the peatland. There were immediate signs that the peatland is re-wetting. Vegetation monitoring is ongoing, and it looks like the works have been successful, with areas of open water that were created by the bunding starting to vegetate with sphagnum moss.
Thanks, Kat. So I'd like to also give you a brief overview of our Solutions by Nature business. Solutions by Nature is a joint venture between RSK companies Binnies and Salix, established in 2021, bringing together over 100 years of Binnies engineering expertise and Salix's industry-leading delivery of nature-based solutions. As such, we're able to provide whole life cycle solutions to the water utility industry and beyond, from initial concept and feasibility through design and build and further into monitoring, evaluating and evidencing the performance and benefits of those solutions. Finally, we provide tailored maintenance programs to ensure optimal benefits continue to be achieved. We're able to do this via a combination of key features from our joint venture partners, including expert knowledge of the individual characteristics and performance of different plant species, the UK's largest wetlands nursery, growing over 3 million plants from over 200 native species by the end of this year, specialist plant and machinery that are specifically designed for construction in complex, hard-to-reach areas, such as is often the case with delivering these types of schemes, and digital tools and platforms to enable the integration and presentation of solution performance data. I'd like to showcase the diversity of some of our nature-based solutions for you, the first couple of which were delivered by our joint venture partner Salix prior to the creation of Solutions by Nature. Twycross Zoo was looking to create a more natural, sustainable way of treating both general site wastewater and the waste from various animal enclosures and create new habitats in the process. As principal contractor, Salix implemented a series of 18 integrated ponds, wet grassland ditches and gravel reed beds. They used over 28,000 wetland plants consisting of over 30 different species and re-established 20,000 square metres of grassland using both hydroseeding and drill seeding techniques. Benefits achieved included a reduction of 37% in water treatment costs and 28% lower equivalent CO2 emissions, as well as an additional 252 species of plant and animals, with 9 of these being locally important biodiversity action plan species. The project also provided the zoo with a new exhibit and educational facility that enabled engagement on sustainability and native species issues with over 19,000 visitors per year. The River Lee is a chalk stream that flows through the urban centre of Luton. The river has been heavily modified, straightened and culverted over many years of development, disconnecting it from groundwater, its natural floodplain and from geomorphological processes. Under the Water Industry National Environment Programme, or WINEP, Affinity Water was obligated to ensure the river meets good ecological potential status as set out in the Water Framework Directive. They sought to achieve this by naturalising a section of riverbank and channel bed, improving biodiversity and making it more resilient to low flows and future climatic conditions. Salix undertook the construction of the scheme in 2018, which included new vegetated reprofiled banks and berms, riffles and new meandering in the channel to kickstart natural river processes, creating river flow dynamics and multiple habitats for plants, insects and fish, and increasing biodiversity within the river corridor. The previous monoculture of amenity grass has been replaced with a variety and complex structure of the macrophyte flora to encourage a variety of terrestrial and aquatic insects to feed and populate a once sterile parkland landscape. The new wetland area has provided over 1,500 cubic metres of additional flood capacity within the floodplain of the park. This will help to slow the flow, preventing flooding issues further downstream. The wetland area will also retain and give time for floodwater to be absorbed and filtered through to the groundwater. Beddington Farmlands is an important 161 hectare wetland area for wildlife and is classified a site of importance for nature conservation and metropolitan open land. The lagoons were traditionally used for sludge treatment and drying, which provided ideal habitat for farmland birds and important breeding species, including lapwing, common redshank and yellow wagtail, among others. An upgrade to the neighbouring sewage treatment works made the lagoons redundant, and the land was subsequently taken over for landfill. The lagoons have continued to dry, leading to a significant decline in bird numbers. Solutions by Nature has just concluded a large stakeholder engagement exercise to better understand the nature of the problem and provided a baseline hydrological assessment which confirmed permeability issues on the site. It's unlikely that a new licence would be granted to abstract from the work's final effluent before this is discharged into adjacent River Wandle in low flow periods when the wetland needs it most. Therefore, we'll undertake ground investigation and a 10-month groundwater monitoring exercise to inform the development of a sustainable natural solution for re-wetting the lagoons. As part of addressing its WINEP obligations, Anglian Water has declared that it plans to implement 26 integrated constructive wetlands for the purpose of phosphorus removal by the end of the next regulatory cycle in 2030. Phosphorus can cause eutrophication, which then leads to increased algal growth, including toxic species. As suggested earlier, these ICWs can be used to remove phosphorus along with other nutrients and pollutants, augmenting processes at wastewater treatment works in order to obtain the permitted discharge consents into receiving watercourses. To support Anglian Water's Capital Delivery Alliance at One, Solutions by Nature, along with design partners Vessi International, are just drawing the initial stage of the programme to a close, having assessed the feasibility of implementing an ICW at 36 different sites. We've just commenced the detailed design stage of the first scheme in the programme, with a view to progressing design of several further schemes this year. So I hope Kat and I have managed to increase your awareness and understanding of what nature-based solutions are and can be. showcasing the potential multiple co-benefits they can bring and how they might help address some of the key challenges we face today. With that, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us, and I'll hand back to John.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, both. If you could pop your cameras on, and everyone on the panel as well, then we can ask a few questions. What time is it? We've got about 12 minutes for questions. So if you're all there, which you seem to be, first of all, thanks both. That was fantastic. Just a whole range of different things under that kind of banner of nature-based solutions. And I think it's really useful, especially the case studies, to get a sense of the different things that can be done under that banner. First question I have, I'm not sure who wants to take it, is what are the potential maintenance and management requirements for an integrated constructed I was going to say wetland. Who wants to take that one?
I could start if you want. Good afternoon, everyone. There aren't any. No. In essence, with all nature-based solutions, what is key is the appropriate design, and that is having sustainability at its core. Ideally, ICWs are gravity fed, so the water would naturally flow in from a sewage treatment work, and then using gravity flow throughout the wetlands. The very nature of ICWs are that they're low maintenance and self-regulating. So I think if you think of them as opposed to your traditional wetlands, these are massive green plants. So if we get the plants and planting scheme right at the front end, using mature native plants, there's very little that actually needs to be done to maintain them, other than maybe pulling out the occasional tree that comes in through succession. The load from an ICW is very much dependent on what's coming out from the sewage treatment work. So there can be some organic buildup in cell 1, but that can be removed in 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them that have been built haven't had to have any removed as yet. But the benefit of an ICW is that they're built in a series. So one of the first cell can be taken out of the series, the material can be removed. The material has rich organic content, which, as we all know, the price of fertilizer at the moment could be a significant benefit to farmers. And so subject to planning consent, it could be spread on farmers' lands. So yeah, in essence, light touch maintenance.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I'm getting a load more questions coming in, so I will press on. Right, this is from Mia Louise Connor. Thank you for an informative presentation. Can I ask, when choosing trees, so I think this is for you, Wayne, as our forestry expert, for a large project, how is species of tree chosen? Is it a mixture of broadleaf, a single species of broadleaf, or coniferous?
Okay, so a lot will depend upon the objectives as to the reasoning behind the woodland creation, but what we tend to use is a forest research tool called ECS, and on there it tells us the most appropriate tree species for the climate for that particular geographical location. So we tend to base our, let's say, portfolio of species to be put forward from that ECS data.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so next one, they're piling in. Right, oops. Excuse me, I'm working with my laptop in the middle of a pub, which is not making this so easy. Right, so a similar sort of question to the first one. I think, does the soil in a roadside bioswale need replacing after a period of time, and is this considered contaminated land? So I don't know if that's Russell again or David. Does anyone want to take that? Oh, silence. Can anyone hear me? Or does no one want to take it?
I think David
Russell,
is David on mute?
David, if you're answering, you're on mute. Oh, we're having technical issues. Tell you what, I'll ask another question whilst we're waiting for David to come back on up online. So the construction industry is a traditional industry. How are you going to meet get mass buy-in to nature-based solutions? Good question. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I could try. I think part of it is what I was saying in the presentation, which is continued education and proofs. The more we do, the more we prove, the more data exists. And if we get cynical, I think then cost savings as well. If we can identify a lot of cost savings and simplicity associated with some of the nature-based solutions, that might start driving the industry towards that. If lower cost, lower complexities.
Yeah, I don't think that's cynical. I think that's just pragmatic, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's also linking it to their targets as well. I mean, I'm getting more and more interest. People are definitely in the construction industry are wanting to know more about it. I think I kind of covered it in that, you know, they're being asked by their clients, and they're wanting to leave a legacy. It helps them win work, but there is there's definitely an increase in interest, and I think, you know, people don't want to just be tick boxing anymore. There's how can we develop? So there's lots of. I feel very hopeful and positive about it. I think there's definitely an increased interest.
I mean, if it can be cost effective and it has all these other benefits, which, as you say, tick lots of boxes in terms of biodiversity and flood risk prevention, all the rest of it, then, you know, they do make an awful lot of sense to companies. It's just making the behavioural sort of mind shift for the more traditional construction companies who maybe need to see this trialed and working, you know, before they commit to something like this. But it's, as you say, Kat, it definitely is something that is changing over time.
And the other thing that I think is linking it to natural as well, so it can be used for a corporate sort of ESG reporting. It's having that sort of evidence base, as Tony said. It's, you know, being able to show the value that it provides, and, you know, bigger clients are asking for that. So.
Yep. Okay, we've got another 5 minutes or so. So, what are the challenges of dealing with multiple stakeholders? In brackets, water companies with landowners and or local authorities.
So I think the difficulty is possibly conflicting drivers and agendas is one of them. I touched on it briefly earlier. You know, some of these solutions work at a catchment level, by that I mean a much wider level than a kind of point of source issue. And in that wider catchment, that results in integrating lots of these different landowners and people with a vested interest, different stakeholders, like I said, local authorities, trusts, and it's coming together as a group and understanding all of these parties having different targets, different drivers, different regulation, legislation application to them, and understanding how then those benefits, which is why there's exercises like the natural capital accounting and doing proper feasibility assessments at the start. It's really, really helpful to drive those out from the earliest point and then get that kind of common, just like you would with any scheme, that common buy-in, because there's a mass benefit to all, and bringing those all together on the same page. I think that to me is one of the biggest challenges. And then with landowners, you know, a lot of people are seeing land as a natural inheritance through generations of their families. So we need to look at alternative models like leasing, where you can retain that ownership, but you can possibly carve out an income stream from using part of the land that may not be that beneficial for other purposes.
I think it's having a dialogue, isn't it, John? It's really about stakeholder engagement and trying to understand, you know, there might be ways of making it beneficial, different ways of making it beneficial for different parties as well, you know, so identifying one of those and then working together.
Exactly. I think the more benefits you have, the more people you can bring in who do have an interest and a vested interest.
And I think it also helps. I think this nature-based solutions will be really helpful in binding people together around the landscape and sort of a common purpose. So that will hopefully, that's the idea.
Yeah, and the next question actually is related to that. So how do you identify the other local needs for multiple benefits? And does this include using catchment partnership action plans as these are all water-based? So these are all water-based case studies. So how do you identify the other local needs for multiple benefits? I guess it's back to that engagement point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I mean, it depends. I mean, I mentioned also where we're working with Severn Trent Water, and it's it's talking to the landowner, it's talking to different teams within Severn Trent Water, so that looking at sort of what works for them, and you know, ways that it can sort of complement each party involved. So it's that sort of, I think it's primary, it's stakeholder engagement really, and liaison.
And I would agree. I think the catchment partnerships are absolutely key, because it's all of the interested parties working within a geographical catchment who have identified their priorities and are looking for funding. So the idea of being able to link them together and linking the catchment partnership to these conversations is really, really important.
And yeah, the next question is kind of related to that, because it's about flooding in the catchment. So given unprecedented levels of flooding, how will integrated constructed wetlands fare? And what responsibility will the Environment Agency have with the water companies to protect against flooding and pollution and any dredging to maintain the waterways? It's quite tricky questions.
That's more than one question. That's numerous different questions.
Okay, right. How will these constructed, ICWs deal with
ICWs? So the integrated constructed wetlands retain water and are designed to retain water, and so storm flows would be designed to be incorporated within the operation of an ICW, and retention times would be 24 hours, 48 hours, potentially up to 4 or 5 days as the water works its way through. So if we have multiple ICWs within a catchment, the stormwater will be naturally held back and will be naturally treated, and so therefore is undoubtedly part of the a key part of the solution.
Yeah.
I think it's it's having that larger landscape level approach as well, and remembering that there's all of the I think the case studies here look at flooding in some degree, and it's looking at those different solutions and those working together as well, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, okay, so we've got time for one more, I think. So this is an interesting one. So we're hearing a lot about carbon credits and the value of carbon, but less about natural capital and biodiversity credits and their value. Can you comment on this? Do they exist, and where is this all heading? I might take that myself, if people don't mind. I'm not on the panel, I'm just hosting this, but that's what we do, part of what we do in wilding. So biodiversity credits are becoming much more of a thing after the Environment Act got its royal assent back in November last year. And so constructed wetlands and any nature-based solutions, there will be funding mechanisms that might be driven by flooding, as we've just talked about, might be driven by water quality, might be driven by carbon, might be driven by biodiversity. In a way, it depends on what the key driver is. So I'm in Bedfordshire at the minute looking at land, for example, to do with offsetting development impacts on biodiversity. So there's a clear driver there to create a system to offset that biodiversity, but at the same time I'll be wanting to clean up the water, hold back flood water, sequester carbon, all of these other things. So yes, biodiversity credits and other natural capital benefits are definitely coming to the fore, but not, carbon obviously has been around for 10-15 years, so that it's not as mature a market as with carbon. But I think there are a lot of different drivers now, other natural capital benefits. So kind of watch this space, I think, as far as that's concerned. I wonder if we can squeeze one in. I don't want to be the last person speaking. Okay, so apart from BNG, what other more immediate measures of success or targets can be set for NBS, such as green roofs? So let's say you're not doing it for BNG, you're doing it for something else. What sort of measures for success would you have? I guess it depends on what it is. If it's peatland restoration, I don't know. It's how much carbon it's sequestering. If it's one of your wetland schemes, Tony,
I was going to say it's water quality for us, but that's obviously the setting and the client. BNG doesn't actually tend to be a primary driver at all with a lot of the work that we do naturally with the water utilities. So that's a big thing. I guess with others it might be carbon offsets. Looping back to your question about construction and uptake in construction and the proof of carbon credentials through the supply chain. So CO2 emissions and reducing those might be the major factor. It really is horses for courses.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned some of the what else is being measured. So water flow on the Broughton estate, water quality. I'm just thinking about the, greenhouse gas emissions might be being measured. It depends on what the driver is for that, or the co-benefits. And for some, it will also be looking at how the local economy and local engagement, recreation. So again, it's kind of linking up also to natural capital. They're all sort of interlinked, aren't they?
And the more you measure, the more you demonstrate the benefits you're having. So there is an incentive to do that, of course. Yeah, whether that's a route to funding, or whether it's just a nice to have and you can demonstrate to people the great stuff it's doing. I think it doesn't really matter. Right, I'm going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for the talk, guys. Really fascinating stuff, and right on the cusp of where things are going at the moment. Just to say that the next First Thursday Club in a month's time, on the 2nd of March, is from my colleague Stephanie Ray, who's a Director of Nature Positive at RSK, and that's all about moving forward after COP15. So she went out to Montreal and was there for the debates, and so it's really what you can do for biodiversity on the back of that very important meeting. So thanks again for your attendance. Thanks to the speakers and our panelists, and have a very good day, everyone. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.